in general, I do my day job as pretending to be a designer, unlike most of you who are actually real designers. And at the studio, we've designed about maybe software that's used by about 120 million people. And then by night and some days, I also teach at an institute in Cambridge. But let's set the stage a little bit here. Humans, for the most part, have treated their condition the same for millennia. Here we've roamed around a bit. We eat mostly green stuff. We drink water. And we get it on and procreate. And as long as we're feeling okay, we think we're okay. And generally that's true. And then health happens. And usually when we least want or expect it. And in the past, 1,000 years ago, you had a tribal leader or elder who's done this 50 times before, setting broken bones and things like this, purely by experience. And then what's this fabulous service that we had almost 100 years ago, which is actually coming back in terms of the roaming doc or community doc that comes to your house and actually gives a rat's ass about your health. This is a really fabulous service, although the technology back then was a lot different, but they could diagnose and treat fever and malaria. And now here, this is actually a scan of my own busted up bicep when I was catching my son. At least I'm pretty sure he's my son. When he was flying off the couch, I dove across the room and snap, there goes the bicep. But this phenomenal imaging techniques that we've had over the past 30 years. So the problems, though, are pretty much the same, where we have episodic issues and periodic exams, where you have these rare spikes in your health, like me busting up my bicep or whatever, cancer unfortunately gets into people, that requires this kind of extreme intervention. It's management by exception. We all know that horrible word in software and so on. But what's remarkable is what's happened over the past century, even the past 40 or 5 years, from barely even treating burn victims. Typically, even now, they're still bandaging people up and waiting 2 months while they heal. Now, there's a new technique coming out about spray painting your own skin cells onto the burn, first, second, third degree. You walk in, and about 2 hours later, they spray paint it on. And then within days, you're out of the hospital looking like nothing's happened. It's an amazing, amazing sort of a session of technology that's happened over the past couple years. And so this jump in our understanding and of our biome and our biology is really startling. Yet, we're still stuck in this land of episodic treatment, both in terms of our thinking and our engineering and designing for health. Because I sure as hell don't want to think about my health the same as 1,000 years ago. So let's do a quickie thought experiment, where suppose your data is just collected beautifully, seamlessly, right? You're surrounded by all of this, all of your data from your existence. Financial right now, because everyone cares most about their money, that's already pretty much digitalized. Travel, again, pretty much the same thing. But habits and eating and exercise, what happens in your house, your biome, it's just captured. Pretend that's the case. It just happens. So here's me. This is a design that I came up with Eric and Harry, so my cohorts here. It's called HGraph. It's an open source visualization technique of my health, where the green zone, not a rat green zone, but the good green zone in this case, if you're in it, you're good. If you're outside of it, not so good. Okay? It's like basically a more simplified or easy to chew on spider graph or Kiviat graph. And in the middle is this thing called the H-score, which is scoring you just like you've grown up in elementary school and high school and college and more. You know what 0 to 100 means typically when you get it on a test, right? So this is the same kind of thing. It's an experimental measure, basically, correlated with statistical open source data sets. And there are my kids and my partner. And then, here's more of my data. Just like Eames 10 by 10, if you've seen that movie, you can go from the galactic to the atomic. You zoom, 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 zoom in. And so here are my Cleveland Heart Clinic labs from last year, which actually have dramatically changed. So these are, it's all real, by the way. This data, none of this is faked. There's no lorem ipsum anywhere in this, which is a crime. But that's a separate conversation. All of my health data, by the way, has been open source. My entire genome, the entire genome, not just the SNPs, are available to download. So if you want to plant my DNA at the crime source, feel free. But again, you can see my data here. because it's just collected. And I can see, again, more and more, and look at the patterns across it, because it has to be valid for both me as the patient and clinically relevant, because if doctors don't chew on it, then we're in trouble as well. So I can see all my family's health numbers, the metrics are known, you can see your data, the trends, the journeys, your family's data, it's at our fingertips. And yet, this is pretty much in stark contrast with what happens now with the design of your life. We have minimal transparency into these key metrics, right? Yeah. We have an enormous amount of overhead required to grab it. People have a hard enough time calculating mortgages and putting on their underpants in the morning. And then we're expecting them to really deep dive into their health data. I think this is a problem. And we as a species, as humans, are not very good at multidimensional thinking. We're very good at the eins, zwei, and hey, this is in front of me, I get it, versus the long now issues of health. So, seeing every variable and doing that mental calculus to orchestrate better decision making, ain't in our forte. And we fly by the seat of our pants, obviously. So now couple that idea, barely even being able to sort of conduct our current lives, I'm being a little over the top, with the proliferation of smart sensors. So they're blowing up. Sensors are everywhere, and just like the DARPA line from a couple of decades ago, smart dust is all around us. So we have to get used to it, whether we like it or not. So here we are on the surveillance invasion, and I can't help but think about this classic scene from Blade Runner. It's the Voight comp machine. You don't have to remember that. But it's an interrogation device, right, that allows people to look into another person's or replicant's eye and make a non-invasive diagnosis on their health status, right? I always love this thing. Now, it's a potential sort of freak-out moment for a lot of people because, I don't want that to be the future of my health with surveillance and security of the human condition, but I think it's a classic scene. And there's some really good things in here, there's this doctor-God relationship between the replicant human and the real human, where the judge and jury sort of carries out this assessment with a tech-heavy device. That's not so different from what happens today. Yeah. And I think it's not very human by design, for the movie. And ultimately, let's not fetishize the hardware. Sometimes I do, but hardware is on the decline, generally speaking, because it's a customer acquisition tool versus anything else. So, but what this does do, the Voight comp machine, is it looks at some really spot-on particular health metrics, which are respiration, looks at BP, looks at heart rate, eye movement in response to these, evocative, emotional questions, and it looks at the retinal blood vessel structures, right? Just to name a few things that this movie supposes it's going to do. But guess what? That's here. We have this now, right? There's this confluence of all this, data analytics maturity and hardware durability and miniaturization, which is this really great forcing function to look at how to predict human health. So I think in a year or so, in the next 350 days, there's going to be a really amazing algorithm, a human prediction algorithm, that's going to look at our lives, and it'll probably only be about 5% wrong. So the first one to that is going to make a boatload of money. So in the design studio that I live in, I think there are probably over a dozen of these wearable health devices that we've sort of abused over the past half dozen years. From the Basis watch, to a Fitbit, to the Withings, to my heart monitor that I'm having right here. There's the AliveCore on your phone that does EKG on the fly, and we even have a camera now that looks at your when you walk in the office, it looks at BP automatically. Your new Xbox One and the PS4 will have that capability to actually change how your player plays in the game depending on your BP level when you're sitting on the couch, right? Awesome, coming, freaky. So the problem here is that they require a metric ass ton of overhead to deal with, right? It's a technical term. So when we look at, the Withings Pulse, for example, it tracks your steps and general activity and sleep and heart rate. And it's actually pretty good. Yet, my biggest beef with just some of these and most of these is that you have to wear them. If you're not wearing them 24/7, it's where they lose fidelity. And when you can stick them in your pockets relatively easy. I don't wear it at night, and so that's losing a lot of data. So my body media armband is not a set it and forget it. I have to take it off to shower and charge. And so you have slick new devices like the Shine. I don't know if you've seen this, is coming from Kickstarter. But form factor really isn't the question. right? Because no form factor really absolutely does it. Maybe it's the implant, it's probably invisible. So hardware typically is this gateway drug to the services and data. And if you're planning to get into hardware, and health hardware in particular, it's almost too late, sort of, right? The current device lineup has little to do with the commodity of hardware and all about your information decision making. So the flip side of this is like, again, my data, is from a wellness point of view, do off times really matter? Really, I want a device where if I'm feeling a little sick, I wear it, and then it helps me completely drop my sickness levels or my duration by 50%. That's the kind of thing that I want to wear, not the current stuff, which most of us, how many in the audience actually are wearing some kind of pedometer health device? Yeah, see, it's already the wrong crowd. Because most of us sort of have some experience. So the idea here is that I don't want to think about health. We're going to design products typically that design and capture data beautifully. Usually that's going to mean invisibly. So here's like a picture of my current house. Yes, this is my current house. And here are the sensors in it now. And yet over time when I walk around, I stand at my desk, I go pee, all this physiological data is going to be snagged to do DSP analysis on, right? And over time, I do a longitudinal study, the machines do it, and they can see when I'm getting sick before I even feel a damn thing. And this is where machine learning and big data and design all sort of collide. So let's talk about something sort of exciting. Maybe it's not exciting to you, it's exciting to me, but it's the bathroom, okay? This is going to be, in the next couple of years, your invisible haven of sensors where I can walk in and it can tell me, hey, that dosage you just took of Coumadin was about 3x what you were supposed to do. Why? Because it's actually looking at hair follicles and when I go to the bathroom and blood flow. They have most of the stuff out now. I mean, this is available as a one-piece set. So there's no mental or physical overhead here of capturing the data. Just like everyone raised their hand as the pedometer or some kind of heart rate monitor. It takes an enormous amount of frontal cortex to actually do and engage with. This stuff is invisible. It just will happen, right? So this ain't the bathroom anymore. It's going to be your health room. And so ultimately, I don't really care about my patient portal. You have those things here, I presume, right? Unfortunately, electronic health records, God forbid. It's really about those teachable moments in data, these usually microshifts through baby steps that show me the future and where to get better. So look, the majority of all of our personal physiological data and signs will be snagged non-invasively. Stuff that basically sniffs and whiffs you no blood draws, or at least very few blood draws. And all of this is just going to happen automagically. It's got to be designed to feel wonderful, or else no one's going to really use it. And yet, how do we know more about health and healthy behaviors and think much more about life and less about health and security? I don't want to think about that stuff. No human wants to think about it. So over time, and this is another funky thing, but it's coming, you can feel it coming, is like these digital health cards. So these are going to pound on all my data, and look at patterns across it to keep me healthier and identify trends and reduce my time of sickness. Look, I have something from Citibank right now, which looks just across my financials. It's a digital bot, just like this, a guard, but just for my financials. It costs me like $12 a month. And what it does is it notifies me immediately when there's suspicious action across any financial transaction that I've had. So I get a lot of false positives, but it's an interesting model. And it does it in near real time. So I think next up is something like a Netflix model. Maybe it's called Love Life. I don't know what it is. But I don't know how much it's going to cost. Maybe $1, maybe $100 per month. And it's going to look over my entire data. It's going to protect that data. It's going to allow me to proxy it to someone who I want to for a week, for a day, for eternity. And I think this is going to it's going to be just part of our lives. And I know this sounds a little scary, but it's going to be a hassle-free service that's coming. Now, the funky side of this is, where the sensor cloud will monitor all of my online and physical activity. So it'll suggest that if 90% of my bandwidth is prawn, then maybe that's why I have trouble performing, quote unquote, with my live, in the flesh boyfriend. But what's crazy is data is starting to trickle in just on this topic, right? Even though the researchers are having a hard time finding control groups. But I know this sounds a little cheesy and at the same time spine-chilling, but all of our focus really should be focusing on our dreams rather than health. Now, I had this idea, at least I wanted this in my house. Woody Allen's Sleeper, if you've seen it, it's called the Orgasmatron. Now, it just sounds like what it sounds like. You walk in, you have a blast, you walk out 5 seconds later, woo! Party me. It's great, but that's how health should be, right? You sort of, and that's where I think design and engineering can have real impact, so sign me up to do that. And so we're really becoming at this at a zero-stage detection game, where if you look back on our current aging cycle, so it's pretty much downhill for anyone over 25 here, it's over. But how do we as a species sort of progress through life? This is the quality of our life on one axis and how old we're getting. And this is how we have been living for the past, millennia, many millennia. Just gradual road to perdition. It gets ugly over long now. So, that's exciting. But with all of our biome analysis, you're sloughing off right here. There's the best UID known to mankind right now, what I just left right here, your biome, through emotional analysis, through breath evals, through voice analysis. I can use my phone right now, and it can analyze my voice, and one, tell me when a cold's coming on 3 days before it manifests, or two, it can actually look at conditions like Parkinson's and tell me 5 or 6 years in advance by tremors in my voice whether I get Parkinson's. Now, there's a whole other discussion, well, what do I do now that I found out? But again, that's what's coming. We can nail it way in advance, right? So I can make real-time adjustments. So, look, based on what's emerging from all those fun things I talked about, and synthetic data population stuff, and all that kind of fun stuff, I think it's going to change our aging cycle. From one that went from a precipitously downward trend after 25 or 18, to one that looks much more like a washing machine that you get at Sears. Now, that sounds crass, but that's how I want basically my life to work in terms of either you get it, you put it in your house, and it dies immediately. Or it works beautifully for 130 years and has a catastrophic failure. Boom, over. Right? The whole point is I don't want to die slowly. I want to have a really great quality of life, live longer, and just boom, it ends, right? This whole, many of us have probably dealt with parents or grandparents going through dementia, going through Alzheimer's, going through horrible cancers. This is the kind of thing that we're busting out pretty soon out of our vocabulary, which is a good thing. It's too late for me, but my kids maybe. So I think some of the upcoming services that you are going to see, everyday people in the mall, things like that, there are places on the human body, very few, that allow you to see into the blood flow without cutting the skin. And one of those is the eye. You have unadulterated access to blood vessels. And what I think is great is that by looking at these, you can see in advance, like diabetes type 2, you can see diabetes type 2 manifesting itself in the blood vessels 3 years before anything happens that you would detect in normal circumstances. Same with some cancers. Same with really some chronic, nasty diseases. So here are two projects which I think are really pretty neat. One is Netra. It's this uber low-cost optical imaging. It's like sub $15 for this device. You put it on top of your phone. It does the ocular imaging right there and then processes it. And then the yin to that yang is called Eyes First, excuse me. It's an open source database of eye scans that there are about 5,000 records per condition. So if I have type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, they look at your eye blood vessels. And then you can actually make an algorithm. It's a statistically relevant sample size in order for you to begin to automate the diagnosis of that on your phone. So you don't need a doctor in the loop. The doctor is your phone, right? So I think those are two very cool projects. Here's some other ones where, in this case, this is what's currently used to do the optical imaging exams. They're like $100K. But the cost of hardware, generally speaking, is approaching zero. So in the next couple of years, this is going to go from $100K to 20K, and then eventually it'll be in your photo booth when you go to the mall and do photo with your friends in the booth. It'll automatically be looking at your eyes and then saying, "Psst, you want come over here, we got a little surprise. So this is another project where I think it's really fun, and part of the bathroom or health room now is extracting accurate pulse and respiration blood oxygen levels right from low-cost, low-res imaging. Right, this is really pretty neat. It measures slight variations in the brightness of your blood flow through your face, same with kids, where you can amplify the variations in video frames allow humans to see the invisible, right, where all of a sudden you see the blood, your heart rate and your BP just by looking at video. In near real time. They do this, they're just about to start this in neonatal care right now, so they don't need to put any devices on them. Again, completely non-invasive. And I have thousands of examples of this, from particle sniffers to new MRI devices. So this is Xanadu. I don't know how many people have been tracking this. It's coming out of NASA Ames in California, where it's got like 9 different non-invasive metrics it's calculating. It's like a hockey puck. You stick it in your pocket. Pretty damn cool. Now, the scary stuff is coming out of like another project called Atoms out of Penn State, where just by breathing, you'll be able to find 25 different variables in your breath, from your metabolism rates to what you just ate, etc. This is becoming nasty and fun. And the side to this is that you're going to get basically a 1 nanometer resolution spectrometers for under $10. So what does that mean? That means I can look at a piece of food and not, goddamn, take an Instagram photo of it, but identify correctly that it's got peanuts in it, and the human eye could never determine that. You want to see that almost at the cellular level, and at the $10 spectrometers, at the nanometer res, easy peasy. Now, there's a whole other argument: is should you let peanut allergy people, go off the cliff? But let's not talk about that. But sooner rather than later, in the next like 3 years, because this is on the table now at places like UCSD in San Diego, where they're making these boxes that's going to churn out personal medicine for you. These are going to be like seek and destroy missions, right, at the cellular level. Pretty damn, you're not going to notice a damn thing. It's great. So, and then you're going to be notified by your biome sloughing off on your counter in your bathroom that you're going to have a cold coming on, and then your day treat is going to be automatically pushed to Walgreens, or name your pimp of choice, drug pimp of choice, and 60 minutes later they're going to pop out this pill, and you're going to take it orally, it melts away, boom, done in minutes. You've just completely annihilated that particular issue. There's no stuffy head, no aching muscles, no fever, no sign of health, right? So sounds scary? Yes, a little bit. But the tricky thing that a lot of ethicists point to is the idea of spoofing. And yes, security is going to be a problem. I think it's going to be much more a problem at the population level, less at the one-off level. How can I spoof thousands and millions of people? Because that's where the data resides, is I'm going to be able to look at millions of people's records and be able to spoof millions of people's issues. That's where it gets fun. But Hal's here. Okay, sliding slope, we're already there. Fun, fun, fun. Woo! Okay, so what's next? As a United Statesian, maybe as a North American, this is how we're taught the world works, right? With money at the center, of course, right? But let's just for a second pretend we're a little more green and think the planet is at the center and the slowest moving force. Now, this is basically pace layering. I don't know if you've seen this chart before, but the point is, you need, as a designer, as an engineer, you need to attack health, and many other disciplines for that matter, at many different levels to have impact, right? So here it's like the fashion moves very quickly, it rotates quickly at the top, it changes, and then as you move towards the center, it gets slower and slower, but the more impact you have, right? So one is, I think designers in general need to get into policy. Now that's just, an ugly, scary, hair-pulling experience. But I think, Bill talked about looking 5 years out and starting in on what you want to do. I think that's just like what you're doing here, is you're looking at policy and how can I infect it 5 years from now. We try to do that. We have a health card and universal ID we did about 5 or 6 years ago, and that sort of generated more things, and we got into more infrastructure problems, and then we're actually now, and have been for a half dozen years, working on data policy for the United States at the national level. So I think if you design, if you do some policy work, some infrastructure work, you have lots of different ways to look at the problem. and it diversifies your attack on that domain. So we, as in all of us here, are doing what orbits did to travel agents, right? That medical tech, that design and culture shifts are doing to doctors. So doctors are going to need to evolve just like travel agents did, or die. So the second thing, let's get into policy, and the second thing is, I think as designers, you need to be able to start designing and identifying those fabric of life robots, or microbots, and what they monitor seamlessly, invisibly, beautifully, constantly, in a friendly manner, all in the protection of me and my family's health. And then determine how to design that service, really to have a lovely experience, right? And then change, ultimately, my behavior. So the third thing is you need to get into prediction models. Based on life data, based on the delta of my decisions and behaviors, and you need to validate those, not just, because we have computer models, but you need to validate them with real humans. And then I think those are the best risk models will win. And then lastly, this is much more of a United States-centric term in terms of uninsured, but here it could be just the people who are ignored. Right? There are always big swaths of the population who are ignored. If you can, like I asked everyone who were wearing something before, a good chunk of the audience did, people who don't have the discretionary income to wear these things, if you can make an impact on their lives somehow, right, then you don't think we're going to pick that up, right? That's usually a lot of how you can actually get technology injected into culture, is starting at the fringe, the outside in, and going inside. So I think our medical records, whoops, there we go. Our life records are going to be available for computational abuse, just like they have for Facebook data and Google data. And this machine learning and prediction will vastly improve, for good, our ability to live life and see conditions at their earliest manifestation and give us this fabulous, personalized medical diagnostics and advice. So this is less about tech and more about living, and it's about the human experience, which we're all, I think, trying to really design here. So I think most of us probably are in denial in our health. That's what we need to get out of, make it invisible and beautiful, because what the data does is allows us to live aware of our health. So for example, I'm being told ice cream is high in fat and lots of sugar and high in chemical, and we can process that. Okay, it's bad, but so what? Right? As soon as it becomes quantified, not in a, oh, I got to take a picture and put it in my frickin' diary and look everything up kind of way, but in a here's my daily report, and eating this way that you've done for the past 2 days just took off about 3 months of your life expectancy, or the way you've eaten for the past year has taken off 2.5 years of your life. That's when the entire world changes, but not before. Thanks very much.